The sun rose slowly over the frost-covered fields surrounding Tom Harper's cabin in Bozeman, Montana, casting a golden glow across the rugged landscape. Tom sat at a worn oak table on his porch, a steaming mug of black coffee in one hand, a half-smoked cigar in the other. Piles of papers cluttered the table, old bank statements, faded letters, and newspaper clippings yellowed with age. They told a story of loss and unanswered questions. Beyond the fields, the peaks of the Bridger Range stood tall, their snow-dusted slopes shimmering under the morning light. Tom exhaled a plume of smoke, his weathered face creasing as he stared at the mountains. 40 years, he muttered, his voice rough from years of cigars and sleepless nights. My dad, my brother, me, we gave everything to you, and this is what you leave me with. Tom's family had built Bridger Bowl, a ski resort nestled in the heart of the Bridger Range, into a haven for skiers, snowboarders, and winter enthusiasts. Decades ago, it had been a modest operation, a few runs carved into the mountainside by his grandfather's grit. His father expanded it, adding lodges and lifts, turning it into a destination that drew crowds from across the country. Tom had taken the reins 20 years ago, pouring his life into maintaining the legacy. The resort wasn't just a business. It was his identity, his pride, his home. He could still picture the early days, walking the snowy trails with his older brother Jack, learning the ropes of the business. Jack had a knack for reading the weather, predicting snowfalls with uncanny accuracy. This place is ours, Tom, Jack would say, clapping him on the shoulder. We'll make it the best in Montana. But that was before the winter that changed everything, 5 years ago. Tom's mind drifted to that February weekend, the memory as sharp as the cold that had gripped Bozeman. Jack, always the adventurer, had planned a backcountry ski trip to test a new run in Fairy Lake Basin, a remote area beyond the resort's boundaries. Tom had been laid up with a sprained ankle from a fall while fixing a snowcat. The doctor had been clear: no skiing, no heavy work. Jack had grinned, unfazed. I'll take care of it, he'd said. Me and Mike will check out the basin. We'll be back by Sunday. Mike, Jack's best friend and a seasoned ski instructor at Bridger Bowl, was always up for a challenge. The two had made countless trips together, their backpacks stuffed with gear, their laughter echoing across the slopes. Tom hadn't worried. The basin was tough, but Jack and Mike knew the mountains like the back of their hands. Friday night, Jack sent a photo from their cabin at the resort, a cozy rental they'd used for years, perched on a ridge with a view of the main runs. In the picture, Jack and Mike stood in their ski gear, grinning against the backdrop of the Bridgers, their faces flushed with excitement. Tom texted back, "Don't do anything stupid out there." Jack replied with a thumbs-up emoji and a shot of them sipping hot cider by the cabin's fireplace. That was the last Tom heard from them. By Saturday evening, his texts went unanswered. By Sunday morning, his calls went to voicemail. Unease gnawed at him, but he told himself they were probably deep in the backcountry, out of cell range. The basin was notorious for spotty service. But when Sunday afternoon came and went with no word, panic set in. Tom called the resort's front desk at 4:12 p.m. He'd never forget the time, etched into his memory like a scar. "Can you check cabin 12? Jack and Mike should be there." The clerk, a longtime employee named Sarah, called back 10 minutes later. "Mr. Harper, the cabin's empty. Their gear's here, skis, packs, everything, but no sign of them since yesterday." The next hours were a blur. Tom hobbled to the resort on crutches, ignoring the doctor's orders. Search teams were assembled, resort staff, local police, volunteers. By Monday, it was a full-scale operation. Helicopters buzzing overhead, dogs sniffing through the snow, teams combing every trail and ravine in Fairy Lake Basin. The community rallied, with locals and tourists alike joining the effort. They checked abandoned cabins, remote shelters, even illegal campsites used by drifters in the backcountry. Nothing. No tracks, no gear, no trace of Jack or Mike. Weeks turned into months. The first year, Tom clung to hope. Maybe they were injured, holed up somewhere, waiting for rescue. The second year, he bargained with fate. Maybe they'd gotten lost, wandered into another valley. By the third year, he just wanted answers, even if it meant finding bodies. The search dwindled to an annual memorial hike, a somber tradition where Tom and a handful of loyal volunteers trekked the basin, hoping for a miracle. The resort carried on without him. Tom couldn't face the slopes, the lodges, the laughter of skiers. He'd handed daily operations to Sarah, retreating to his cabin to drown in grief and cigars. The resort was a ghost of his past, a reminder of what he'd lost. This morning, as the cigar burned low, Tom's gaze lingered on the mountains. The Bridger Range stood silent, indifferent to his pain. He stubbed out the cigar, the ash smearing across a bank statement. The phone inside the cabin rang, shrill and insistent. Tom shuffled in, his bad ankle aching from the cold. He picked up on the fourth ring. "Harper here." "Mr. Harper, this is Detective Alan Foster with the FBI," a calm voice said. "We need you at Bridger Bowl immediately. We found evidence related to your brother's disappearance. There's a helicopter waiting at Bozeman Airport to take you to Fairy Lake Basin." Tom's heart skipped. "What kind of evidence?" "We'll discuss it in person. The chopper's ready now." The line went dead. Tom stood frozen, the receiver still in his hand. 5 years of nothing, and now this. He grabbed his coat, a heavy wool thing that smelled of wood smoke, and pulled on his boots. His hands shook as he tied the laces. Could this be the break he'd prayed for? The drive to Bozeman Yellowstone International Airport was a tense 20 minutes. The radio off, the only sound the hum of his old pickup's engine. An officer met him at the gate, ushering him to a helicopter, its blades already spinning. Tom climbed aboard, buckling himself in as the chopper lifted off, skimming over the familiar sprawl of Bozeman. Then the resort, its slopes dotted with skiers like ants on a white canvas. The helicopter banked toward Fairy Lake Basin, a rugged, restricted area known for its treacherous drops and unpredictable snow. They landed in a clearing where the pines parted, revealing a scene buzzing with activity. FBI agents and local sheriff's deputies had cordoned off the area, their breath visible in the crisp air. Tom stepped out, ducking under the rotors. A familiar face approached. Dan Carter, a ski patroller who'd worked at Bridger Bowl for a decade. 3 other resort employees stood nearby, their expressions grim. "What are you doing here?" Tom asked. Dan shifted his weight. "We were testing snowpack for avalanche training. I saw something under a pile of rocks and branches. Called it in." Detective Foster approached, holding an evidence bag. Inside was a blue ski glove, worn but unmistakable. Tom's stomach dropped. "Is this your brother's?" Foster asked. Tom took the bag, his fingers tracing the glove through the plastic. A small embroidered elk on the cuff, a gift from Tom to Jack for his 40th birthday. "It's his," Tom said, his voice barely above a whisper. "He was wearing these that weekend." Dan nodded. "I recognized it from the flyers we put up after they went missing." Foster held up another bag, this one containing a black snowboard jacket, high-end with custom stitching and unusual pocket placements. "This was found 50 yards away, buried under some deadfall. We think it's related." Tom studied the jacket. It wasn't Jack's or Mike's. Too flashy, not their style. "I don't know it," he said. "Never seen anything like that around the resort." Foster's eyes narrowed. "Think back to that weekend 5 years ago. Anyone stand out? Guests? Staff? Anyone wearing something like this?" Tom shook his head. 5 years was a long time, and memories of that weekend were clouded by panic and grief. "We had hundreds of guests. Staff, too. Security footage might have shown something, but it's long gone, overwritten after a year." Foster nodded. "We'll show the jacket around. Someone might recognize the custom work." Dan led them to the spot where the glove was found, a cluster of rocks near a steep drop, partially covered by snow. The jacket had been buried further down, hidden under branches. Tom stared at the site, trying to piece it together. An accident? A struggle? Why were the items separated? Where were Jack and Mike? "We'll expand the search grid," Foster said, "but first we'll check with resort staff about this jacket." As they trudged back to the helicopter, Tom grabbed Dan's arm. "Thanks for keeping up the search. I know it's been tough on everyone, having the owner's brother vanish." Dan looked uncomfortable. "Jack was family to us, Tom. He and Mike were always out there, helping with training, joking with the crew. We never stopped hoping." The helicopter carried them back to Bridger Bowl, the resort coming into view below, its lodges glowing against the snow. Staff gathered as they landed, their faces a mix of relief at seeing Tom and unease at the FBI presence. Sarah, the front desk manager, approached first. "Tom, it's good to see you back." Her smile faded as she noticed the agents. "What's going on?" "Gather everyone in the meeting room," Tom said, his voice steady despite the knot in his chest. "All staff, including part-timers. It's important." Within half an hour, the room was packed. Lift operators, bartenders, instructors, maintenance crew. Faces, some familiar, some new, stared at Tom with curiosity and concern. He stood at the front, the weight of their attention heavy. Foster stepped forward, holding up the evidence bag with the snowboard jacket. "We need to know if anyone recognizes this. It was found in Fairy Lake Basin, near Jack Harper's glove. It's a long shot, but any detail from 5 years ago could help." FBI agents began pulling staff aside for interviews. Tom stood by a window, watching skiers glide down the slopes, their laughter faint through the glass. This was what Bridger Bowl was about. Joy, adventure, community. His father would have been proud to see it thrive, even after everything. A voice interrupted his thoughts. "Tom?" He turned to see Greg Larson, a ski instructor who'd been with the resort for years. Greg was in his late 40s, fit, with a weathered face from years on the slopes. "Greg," Tom said, shaking his hand. "Good to see you." "Heard about the glove," Greg said, his voice low. "And that jacket. Any leads?" "Not yet," Tom said. "You remember anything from back then? Anyone wearing a jacket like that?" Greg shook his head. "Nothing comes to mind. That jacket's fancy. Custom work. Not the kind of thing you see around here much." He glanced at his watch. "Gotta run. Got a private lesson starting." Tom nodded, but something about Greg's quick exit nagged at him. He followed at a distance, driven by an instinct he couldn't name. Outside, Greg was with a group of students, all adults, demonstrating a parallel turn. His movements were smooth, confident, but Tom noticed something off. Greg lingered too long adjusting one student's stance, a young man in his 20s, his hands resting on the man's shoulders, then sliding down his arms. The touch seemed unnecessary, too familiar. Tom frowned. He'd seen instructors make adjustments countless times, but this felt different, almost possessive. As the lesson ended, Greg clapped the student on the back, a bit too hard. "Great work, Tim. Grab a beer at the lodge later?" The student nodded, grinning, and headed off. Tom stayed by the equipment shed, watching as Greg packed up. Another student, a lanky guy with a red beanie, approached Greg, asking about a private lesson. Greg's demeanor shifted, his smile too wide, his tone overly warm. "Sure thing, buddy. Let's set something up for tomorrow." Tom's unease grew. He'd known Greg for years. Hell, they'd shared beers at the lodge, swapped stories about the old days. But this behavior didn't sit right. He headed back to the meeting room where Foster was wrapping up interviews. "Anything?" Tom asked. Foster shook his head. "No one recognizes the jacket. We'll run it through some databases, see if the stitching or brand pops up. I'll call you tomorrow." As the agents left, Tom scanned for Greg, but he was gone, his ski tracks fading into the snow. Tom headed to the lodge, the familiar scent of pine and wood smoke wrapping around him like a memory. He climbed to cabin 12, unlocking the door with a key he hadn't used in years. Inside, it was untouched, a time capsule of Jack and Mike's last trip. Their ski boots sat by the door, a half-empty coffee mug on the table. Tom sank onto the couch, pulling out an old photo album. Pictures of his family spilled across the pages. His dad teaching him to ski, Jack's high school graduation, the day they opened the new lodge. Then he stopped. A photo from 5 years ago. Jack, Mike, and a group of instructors at a staff party. Greg was there, kneeling beside Jack, his arm around him. And on Greg's chest was a black snowboard jacket, its distinctive stitching and odd pockets unmistakable. Tom's heart raced. He pulled out his phone, comparing the photo to the evidence bag he'd snapped a picture of earlier. The jacket was identical. His hands shook as he dialed Sarah at the front desk. "I need Greg Larson's teaching roster, current and, if you've got it, from 5 years ago." Sarah's keyboard clacked. I'll print them now. Minutes later, Tom studied the rosters under the lodge's dim lights. The pattern was clear. Greg's classes were mostly young men, both now and 5 years ago. Is this normal? Tom asked, keeping his voice casual. Greg getting all the young guys? Sarah frowned. Now that you mention it, yeah. Parents, well, mostly dads, request him. Say he's great with shy students, builds their confidence. The words sent a chill through Tom. Jack had been shy as a kid, nervous on steep runs. Greg had always been encouraging, offering extra lessons. Tom grabbed the phone. Can I use this? Go ahead, Sarah said. Tom dialed Greg. Hey, it's Tom. Been too long. Want to grab dinner tonight? My treat. Say 6 p.m. at the Gallatin Grill? A pause. Tonight's sudden, Greg said, his voice tight. I've got plans. I know, Tom said, forcing warmth. Just feeling nostalgic. How about it? Another pause, then Greg softened. All right, 6 p.m. Works. See you there. As Tom hung up, Sarah cleared her throat. Tom, while you're here, we've got a leak in the old storage shed. Water heater's acting up. Tom sighed, back to being the owner. Show me. They headed to the shed, a cramped space packed with old skis, banners, and boxes. A rusted water heater dripped into a bucket, the floor stained with mineral deposits. Been like this for weeks, Sarah said. Not dangerous, but it's driving up costs. Tom nodded. Call Bozeman Plumbing tomorrow. Get it replaced if they can't fix it. His eyes caught a tarp in the corner, moisture beading on it. What's under there? Greg's old gear, Sarah said. Spares he keeps around. Tom pulled back the tarp, revealing skis, boots, and a snowboard. He picked up a pair of snowboard boots, noticing a small, dark object embedded near the ankle. It was a tiny camera, no bigger than a dime, its lens pointed upward. He pressed a button. Dead. The battery long gone. A compartment held a micro SD card. Ever seen this? He asked. Sarah squinted. A camera in a boot? That's weird. Tom pocketed the camera and card, his mind racing. Why hide a camera there? He grabbed the boot and headed back to the lodge, his thoughts a tangle of suspicion. Greg's jacket, his behavior, now this. He needed answers. At the Gallatin Grill, Tom arrived early, the bourbon bottle in his coat pocket. The restaurant was a Bozeman staple, its wooden walls lined with photos of locals and skiers. Tom scanned them, stopping at one from a few years back. Greg stood with a young man, maybe 20, his arm around him. The same protective stance Tom had seen earlier. The caption read, Greg Larson and his nephew, Sam. Nephew. Greg had never mentioned family. Tom ordered a beer, his mind churning. When Greg arrived, he looked tense. Tom, good to see you, he said, sliding into the booth. What's this about? Just catching up, Tom said, pouring bourbon into 2 glasses. To old times. They clinked glasses, but Greg's eyes darted to the door. Tom leaned in. Found something today. A camera in one of your old boots. Care to explain? Greg froze, his glass halfway to his mouth. A camera? Must be a mistake. And that jacket from the basin, Tom pressed. It's yours, isn't it? From that staff party 5 years ago. Greg's face paled. You're reaching, Tom. I don't know what you're talking about. Tom pulled out the photo from the album, sliding it across the table. This you? Same jacket. Greg stood abruptly. I gotta go. Tom grabbed his arm. What happened to Jack and Mike, Greg? What did you do? Greg yanked free and bolted. Tom followed, but Greg was fast, disappearing into the snowy night. Tom called Foster, his voice shaking. It's Greg Larson. The jacket's his, and I found a camera in his gear. Hidden. Foster was calm. Stay put. We'll pick him up. The next weeks were a whirlwind. Greg was arrested at a motel outside Bozeman, his truck packed with clothes like he'd planned to flee. The SD card held footage, grainy clips of young men on the slopes, unaware they were being recorded. The FBI linked the jacket to Greg through purchase records. He'd bought it custom-made in Denver. Blood traces on the jacket matched Mike's DNA. Though no bodies were found, the theory was grim. Greg had lured Jack and Mike to the basin, possibly over a personal dispute. Evidence suggested a struggle, but the mountains had swallowed the rest. Tom threw himself back into the resort, determined to rebuild. He worked with Sarah to tighten policies, ensuring no instructor was ever alone with students. The community rallied, and Bridger Bowl began to heal, its slopes alive with skiers once more. Tom walked the trails sometimes, imagining Jack's laughter, his voice on the wind. He couldn't bring his brother back, but he could honor him by protecting their legacy. One spring evening, Tom sat in cabin 12, a fire crackling in the hearth. He held Jack's glove, its elk emblem worn but comforting. "We're gonna be okay, Jack," he whispered. "Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but we will." The Bridgers stood silent outside, their peaks glowing under the setting sun. In their stillness, Tom found a quiet strength, a promise to keep going. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe for more tales of adventure and mystery.